Thank you, Guruji. Thank you, Bhanudi. Thank you to the Art of Living family. I would come in any case when I'm invited here to the ashram, but it's particularly special case. Thank you so much for the honor and the award, but you've created here an island of the way the world should be. And of course, the subject of our session is restoring the balance of the cycle of nature. Nature works through cycles that never wear out, that are constantly recharged, perennial. And every one of the 5 big ecological crises of our times is related to the disruption of nature cycles because of both the ignorance of man and the greed of man. And the two usually go together. You can only be greedy if you're ignorant. My dedication is, of course, been to renewing the cycle of the seed. It's the nature of the seed to grow into seed. It's the nature of the seed to multiply into many seeds. This morning, we have the most wonderful ragi. These family of crops, which we call forgotten foods because we've forgotten how to eat them, they're called millets. The word millet comes from million, that each seed gives 1,000,000 seeds. That's the reproductive power of the seed, the multiplicative power of the seed. But that's what greed sees threatening. So it has to interrupt that regenerative power, create non-renewable seed, an attempt to make terminator seeds that would not renew, genetically engineered to kill the embryo of the seed when it's forming, to create sterile seed. Genetically modified seeds which are a scrambling of the tree of life, or legal options like patenting. I organized in '93 in Bangalore 500,000 farmers to say, seed is not an invention of corporations, it's a gift of creation. It's part of nature's ability to sustain life. A patent means farmers can't save seeds. It's illegal to save a seed. And we feel it's our duty to save seeds and to protect biodiversity. I say GMOs, the genetically modified organisms, are in fact an arrogant declaration, God move over. We will pretend to be creators. "75% of the disappearance of biodiversity on the planet is because of a form of agriculture that doesn't recognize or respect the cycles of nature. Chemical agriculture, industrial farming, farming with genetically modified seeds. It doesn't recognize that there's a cycle of soil renewal. As long as we feed the soil, millions and billions of soil organisms create soil fertility for us, much more than any factory ever can. And I don't know how many of you are aware that the nitrogen fertilizer factories were the same factories that made the bombs during the world wars. Explosives and nitrogen fertilizers go hand in hand. And very often in extremist activity, you will notice they talk of a nitrogen bomb, a fertilizer bomb, because that was the original purpose. Most chemicals in agriculture have come from the war. They were designed for killing. They continue to kill. It's 30 years since the disaster of Bhopal this year. 30 years. The chemicals that were being made in that plant, their origins were in the nerve gases for the concentration camps. The early experiments on pesticides were done by killing people in concentration camps. And therefore, violence is their very nature. We don't need pesticides because when there's balance in nature, when there's lots of diversity, there's a balance between pests and predators. You have the spiders and the beetles. You have the birds. You have all the species that keep pests under control. The emergence of pests is a signal that agriculture is out of balance. Not giving back to the soil has led to desertified soils, and desertified soils create environmental refugees. I remember when I was young reading a book about Sudan being the breadbasket of the world. Today it's a desert. How many parts of the world, the Dust Bowl in the United States, all a result of not respecting the cycles of the soil's renewal. The fertility of the soil, the structure of the soil, the life of the soil. The soil is a living system. It's not dead matter, as chemical agriculture would like to think. It's a living system. And a living system that has the capacity to not just renew itself, but sustain all life on Earth. 75% of the soils of this planet are degraded. 75% species have disappeared. The water crisis, so severe, I don't even have to talk about it. 75% of the water is used to irrigate not crops, but chemicals. The reason you need so much irrigation in chemical farming is because those nitrates and phosphates and potash has to be dissolved for the plant to take it up. Otherwise, the plants get burnt with those lethal toxics. So we are wasting water rather than conserving it. 40% of the emissions that are called the greenhouse gas emissions come from industrial globalized agriculture. 40%. I wrote a book called Soil Not Oil to put this together. The worst is nitrogen oxide that comes from the nitrogen fertilizers. Carbon dioxide that comes from the use of fossil fuels. Nature has an amazing cycle of recycling nitrogen, recycling carbon, recycling every element. But we've disrupted these cycles by putting too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that nature's not able to absorb. Too much nitrogen oxide, which is 300 times more deadly in changing climate. And it's not the case that climate change is going to make a difference many centuries down the line. I come from Uttarakhand, from Dehradun. We had a disaster I could not have imagined. 16th and 17th of June this year, we had such heavy rain. But not just heavy rain, the glaciers are melting. A glacial lake had formed, Chorabari Glacier. And then with the heavy rain, that lake burst at Kedarnath, above Kedarnath. And you know, we are such an amazing civilization. We made temples at the sources of our rivers. Our rivers are divine goddesses. And the signal of this year's disaster was, wake up humanity. You are breaking the cycles too deeply. I have played in the Mandakini River as a child. That river is gone forever. There is 40 feet of debris from the dams and the hydroelectric projects that was deposited when the flash floods came. The original river, is not there to be seen. We are stealing the air from nature, we are stealing the riverbed from the rivers, we are stealing the species space to survive as part of the earth family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. And we don't have to do it this way, because this disruption of the cycles of nature is creating human poverty. It's creating poverty first because it's creating hunger. You cannot grow more food on desertified soils. You do not grow more food through monocultures. That's been my life's work. My work on the Green Revolution, my work on the monocultures of the mind. Monocultures are very impoverished. Biologically, they don't produce more. When we have more diversity, more mixtures, just as when we culturally have more diversity, as in this beautiful hall, we are richer culturally and socially. Ecologically, we are richer the more diversity we have biologically. And we've done calculations that show that the more diversity on the farm, the more the nutritional output. We shouldn't be measuring yield per acre, which is only a single commodity that goes to the markets. And today, it's not even for food. It's for running cars, for biofuel, torturing animals in factory farms. It's not producing food. 10% of the globalized system that's producing grain is feeding people. 90% is raw material. It's not a food system. We have a beautiful ancient Upanishad, the Taittiriya Upanishad, which says everything is food, everything is something else's food. Repairing the nature cycles means recognizing that everything is food and nutrition. And the cycles of nature are based on the cycles in the soil, between the soil and the plants, between the plants and our bodies. I'm so grateful that when I used to be in Bangalore and I started Navdanya, the movement to save seeds, I realized how deep the connection was between a tiny grain, and in the dining hall, Guruji, you're right up on Navgrahas, how in a tiny grain and in a tiny seed is embodied the entire cosmos, the Navgrahas. So the place where we can begin to restore the balance of the cycles of nature is in our daily eating. In our daily eating, we can start repairing the broken hydrological cycle. We can start repairing the broken cycle of the renewal of biodiversity and seed. We can start repairing the cycle that is leading to climate disruption. And one of the things we're saying, and again, we've had such deep honor to have worked with the Art of Living movement on the organic training. The reason I do organic farming, the reason I save seeds, is because I see it as my sacred duty to the earth, to the planet, and to future generations. And it is small steps that can have very far-reaching impacts. We are, of course, in a very strange situation where 2 environment ministers have been removed because they were not putting a signature on approving genetically modified organisms. I feel very sad that I have to repeatedly tell our Prime Minister that it is not an unscientific prejudice against genetically modified organisms, but a scientifically enlightened recognition that these are plants that produce toxics. They are poison-producing plants. You don't make them the basis of a food system just because there are a handful of companies, literally 5, who make super profits out of selling every seed, collecting a royalty. We have friends from Argentina. It's been turned into a green desert with the Roundup-ready soya. Devastated. We have friends from other parts of the world, Russia, which had a GMO ban. In December, Monsanto made a trip to have it removed, and I hope the Russians will stay GMO-free, because we are in this amazing moment of the worst of forces of greed and violence joining hands to try and make money for 5 years and 10 years at the cost of the planet's future, at the cost of the future of all of humanity. On the other hand, we have 300 million species, 7 billion human beings who have another role to play, the role to serve nature's cycle so that she can constantly provide us in abundance. Nature is not inadequate. Blind technologies and violent tools are inadequate. We need a major mind shift. And Guruji, you have a deep role to play in this. Thank you.